It was just another quiet evening in the small, dusty town. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the sky painted in fading gold. She was walking alone, her worn shoes pressing against the dirt road, when a strange sound cut through the stillness, a soft, trembling cry. She stopped, listening. It wasn't the wind. It was human, frightened, and close. Her heart began to pound as she followed the sound into the shadow of the forest. The air grew colder, the trees whispering around her. Then she saw her, a young native girl, limping, her foot bleeding, standing helpless at the edge of the roaring river. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the orphan felt the pull of something she couldn't explain. She didn't know it yet, but this single step toward a stranger would lead her into the most dangerous morning of her life. Late one chilly evening, the orphan girl walked home through the forest, clutching her thin shawl against the biting wind. The path was dark, covered in dry leaves that cracked under her feet. She was used to the silence of these woods, but tonight, something felt different. Then it came, a faint sound, so soft she almost missed it. A cry, weak and desperate. She froze, her breath clouding in the air. Was it an animal? No, it was human. Heart racing, she stepped off the path, pushing through the tall grass toward the sound. The cries grew clearer, filled with pain. Then, she saw her, a native girl, no older than herself, standing by the riverbank, one leg trembling, her face pale from the cold. The river's current roared beside her, wild and unforgiving. In that instant, the orphan knew this was no ordinary night. Something was about to change forever. The orphan's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the raging water. The river was swollen from recent rains, its surface twisting and foaming like it wanted to pull anything into its depths. The icy wind carried the spray to her face, chilling her to the bone. She knew this river. Even in daylight, it was dangerous. At night, it could kill. Her mind screamed for her to turn back, to run home, to pretend she had never heard those cries. But her eyes couldn't leave the girl on the other side. She stood with one foot sinking in the mud, clutching her injured leg, her face tight with pain. The orphan saw fear there, yes, but also something deeper. Loneliness, helplessness. It was the same look she had worn herself countless nights when there was no one to care. If she lived or died, her heart twisted. The cold no longer mattered. The danger no longer mattered. She stepped into the shallows, and the freezing water swallowed her ankles instantly. The current yanked at her legs, making her stumble. She grabbed a branch to steady herself, the bark biting into her palms. Her shoes were heavy now, soaked through, and each step was harder than the last. The native girl's eyes widened as she watched her approach, shaking her head as if to say don't. But the orphan only pushed forward, her teeth chattering, her breath quickening. Halfway across, the water surged to her knees, then her waist. Her skirt wrapped around her legs like ropes, slowing her down. The river roared louder, as if mocking her struggle. She bit her lip hard to keep from crying out. Her arms trembled from the cold, but she stretched them toward the girl. "Take my hand," she shouted over the water. For a moment, the girl hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Then, with visible effort, she stepped forward and reached out. Their fingers met cold against cold, and the orphan gripped her tightly. The moment their hands locked, the current seemed to grow stronger, slamming against them with unseen force. The orphan planted her feet and pulled, every muscle in her body screaming. Inch by inch, they moved, the girl leaning on her for support, the water threatening to drag them both away. The bank was close now, just a few steps, but the orphan's legs felt like stone. Her breath came in short, painful bursts. With one final push, she lifted the girl onto the muddy shore, collapsing beside her in exhaustion. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, only the sound of the river filling the night. The orphan looked at the girl's injured foot, at the scratches on her arms, at the way she clutched a small leather pouch to her chest. Questions burned in her mind, but she stayed silent. Something told her that the real danger hadn't even begun. Her lungs burned, her arms ached, but there was no time to rest. The native girl's weight leaned heavily on her as they moved along the riverbank, the mud sucking at their feet with every step. The water was louder here, slamming against jagged rocks that jutted out like dark teeth. The orphan tightened her grip on the girl's arm, feeling the tremor of cold and pain running through her. The current surged against them, each wave pushing, with enough force to knock them off balance. Her legs felt heavy, her soaked clothes clinging like chains, but she kept moving. The girl stumbled, nearly falling, and the orphan caught her just in time, pulling her close to keep her steady. "Don't stop," she urged. Though her own voice trembled from the cold, the river didn't care about their struggle. It hissed and roared, impatient to claim them. They reached a deeper section, and icy water climbed up to her chest, stealing her breath. Her teeth chattered so hard it hurt, but her arms locked around the girl, refusing to let go. The girl's breathing grew shallow, her strength fading fast. For a moment, panic clawed at the orphan's chest. What if they didn't make it? What if the current dragged them under before they could see the other side? She forced herself to focus, planting each foot carefully, feeling for solid ground beneath the swirling black water. The noise of the river filled her ears, drowning out every other sound. Then, through the spray and darkness, she spotted a fallen tree stretching from the bank into the water. Its thick trunk could guide them the rest of the way. She pushed toward it, her muscles screaming, the girl leaning heavily against her. Reaching the tree, she hooked one arm around it and pulled the girl forward, step by step, her fingers stiff and numb. The bank was close now, the ground rising beneath them. Summoning the last of her strength, she heaved the girl upward, shoving her onto the muddy shore before collapsing beside her. The orphan's chest rose and fell in painful gasps, her body shaking violently from exhaustion. The girl lay still for a moment, then slowly sat up, clutching her injured leg. She looked at the orphan with eyes full of something unspoken: gratitude, sorrow, and perhaps a warning. The orphan noticed her hands trembling as she held the small leather pouch tighter than before, as if its contents were worth more than her own life. Somewhere in the distance, a faint howl rose over the sound of the river, carried by the wind. The orphan turned her head sharply toward the trees, her heart pounding again. This wasn't over. In fact, it might have only just begun. The orphan sat on the cold ground, her breath still uneven, every muscle trembling from the fight against the river. The native girl beside her was quiet, her gaze fixed on the dark trees ahead, as if listening to something the orphan could not hear. For a long moment, they stayed like that, the roar of the river behind them and the whisper of the forest in front. Finally, the girl turned her head, her eyes meeting the orphan's. They were deep, dark eyes, carrying a weight far beyond her years. She spoke softly, her voice almost lost to the wind. "Thank you," she said, the words filled with a raw sincerity that made the orphan's chest tighten. Before the orphan could respond, the girl's fingers brushed lightly against her hand, a fleeting touch that felt like both a farewell and a promise. Then, without another word, she pushed herself to her feet despite the limp in her injured leg. The leather pouch was still clutched tightly against her chest, her knuckles pale from the grip. The orphan wanted to ask what was inside. Why was it so important? Where was she going? But the questions froze on her tongue. Something in the girl's face told her that answers would not come, not tonight. The native girl took one last look at her, a glance heavy with unspoken meaning. And then she stepped into the shadows of the forest, her form blended with the darkness, her movements silent except for the faint rustle of leaves. The orphan strained her ears, listening, until even those sounds faded into nothing. She was alone again. The cold seemed sharper now, the night heavier. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shake the feeling that she had just touched the edge of something far bigger than she understood. The forest loomed around her, silent yet watchful, as if it knew the path the native girl had taken and what waited at the end. The orphan stood slowly, her legs weak, and looked once toward the direction the girl had gone. For a moment, she considered following, but the thought of disappearing into that darkness without knowing what lay ahead sent a shiver through her bones. Instead, she turned back toward the faint trail that would lead her home. Each step felt heavier, not from exhaustion, but from the lingering presence of a mystery she could not solve. When she finally reached her small cabin, she paused at the door, glancing once more at the dark line of the forest in the distance. Somewhere out there, the native girl was moving toward something or away from it. The orphan didn't know. Which all she knew was that the quiet night no longer felt safe, and tomorrow might bring answers she wasn't ready to hear. She stood frozen in the doorway, the cold morning air brushing her face as 30 pairs of dark, unblinking eyes watched her. Their leader, tall and solemn, dismounted his horse and stopped just a few steps away. The ground felt like it carried the weight of his presence. "You saved my daughter," he said, his voice steady but filled with something that reached deeper than gratitude. "Now, we are here for you." For a moment, she could not speak. She thought of the river, the cold, the silent goodbye, and the mystery in the girl's eyes. And now, standing before these warriors, she realized the night's risk had been more than a choice, it had been a crossing into a fate. She could not escape. The leader's gaze softened, and in that quiet moment, she understood. Her life had changed forever, and the world beyond her cabin door was waiting.